I'm warning you. Back off. The line went dead. Karen stared at her phone, then at the flamingo floating mockingly in the distance. No one had ever threatened her before. No one had ever challenged her dedication to preserving their community standards. She walked to her command center and opened her laptop. If Mike Henderson wanted to escalate this conflict, she'd show him exactly what escalation looked like. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she composed emails to the City Code Enforcement Office, the County Health Department, and 3 different legal firms specializing in HOA disputes. By sunset, she'd filed 17 separate complaints against the Henderson property, covering everything from potential pool safety violations to noise complaints about children's laughter exceeding acceptable decibel levels. As she watched the flamingo's silhouette against the dying light, Karen felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and unease. She'd protected her community from chaos, but something about the victory felt hollow. Her phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. "You've gone too far this time. Some of us are calling for your resignation." Karen deleted the message without responding, but her hands were shaking as she turned off the lights in her command center. Outside, the flamingo continued its lazy rotation in the pool, somehow looking less like a threat and more like a bright spot of joy in an increasingly gray world. "The standards are supposed to protect our community, not terrorize it," Bob said gently. "Karen, when's the last time you saw children playing outside without looking over their shoulders?" The question hit harder than any formal complaint. Karen tried to remember but couldn't. When had Oakwood Estates become so quiet? When had maintaining order become more important than maintaining community? A soft knock interrupted her spiral. Through the window, she saw Mike Henderson standing on her porch, holding something in his hands. Margaret nodded toward the door. "We asked him to come. This affects everyone." Karen opened the door with shaking hands. Mike looked tired, but not angry, just profoundly sad. "Karen," he said quietly, "I brought you something." He held out a small pink flamingo, palm-sized and clearly handmade. "My daughter made this. She said you looked lonely watching our pool all the time, and everyone deserves their own flamingo friend." The gesture was so unexpected, so innocent, that Karen felt something break inside her chest. She took the tiny flamingo with trembling fingers, its rough edges evidence of a child's careful work. "She made this for me?" Mike nodded. "Sophie's 8. She doesn't understand why you're so upset about her pool toys, but she knows you must be sad to spend so much time watching other people have fun instead of having your own." Karen stared at the small flamingo, seeing it clearly for the first time, not as a symbol of chaos or declining standards, but as what it had always been, a simple source of joy for children. The weight of what she'd done, what she'd become, settled on her shoulders like a lead blanket. "I'm resigning as HOA president," she said suddenly, the words surprising even herself. The room fell silent. Margaret started to speak, but Karen held up her hand. "I've forgotten what we're supposed to be protecting," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "I thought it was property values and perfect lawns, but it's actually..." She looked at the tiny flamingo in her palm. "It's the laughter from backyard pools and children making crafts for lonely neighbors." She walked to her command center and began dismantling her surveillance equipment. "The Henderson's pool party is this weekend, right?" Mike nodded cautiously. "Good. I'll bring potato salad." Karen turned to face the assembled group. "And Margaret, you'll make an excellent president. Just remember, sometimes the best way to maintain community standards is to let the community actually be a community." As the group filed out, Karen stood alone in her living room, holding a child's gift and feeling simultaneously like she'd lost everything and found something she'd forgotten she was missing. Outside, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across Oakwood Estates, and for the first time in months, she could hear children laughing in their backyards. The tiny flamingo smiled up at her from her palm, a small pink reminder that sometimes the most important battles are the ones you choose not to fight. But as she placed it carefully on her mantle, Karen couldn't shake the feeling that her story with Oakwood Estates wasn't quite finished. Change was coming to their quiet neighborhood, and she had a strange suspicion that her greatest challenge as a former HOA president might be learning how to simply be a neighbor. The flamingo seemed to wink at her in the fading light, as if it knew secrets about second chances that she was only beginning to understand. The emergency board meeting convened in Karen's dining room at precisely 7 p.m. The mahogany table set with legal pads, penalty charts, and a 3-ring binder labeled nuclear options. Karen had spent 2 days preparing her presentation, complete with enlarged photos of the Hendersons' backyard and a PowerPoint titled The Slippery Slope: How One Flamingo Destroys Everything. Board members trickled in with the enthusiasm of people attending their own root canals. Margaret Chen arrived first, clutching her purse like a shield. Bob Martinez shuffled in next, already looking defeated, followed by Janet Kim, who immediately began stress eating from a bag of pretzels. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Karen began, dimming the lights for maximum dramatic effect. "What we're facing isn't just a covenant violation, it's an existential threat to our community's identity." She clicked to her first slide, a professional photograph of the flamingo, zoomed in to show every offensive detail of its smug plastic face. "This," she announced, "is patient zero." Margaret raised her hand tentatively. "Karen, isn't this a bit extreme?" Karen's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Margaret, I've documented 17 separate violations that have occurred since this creature appeared. Pool noodles left on lawn chairs overnight. A garden gnome spotted in the Williamsons' flower bed. And yesterday, I personally witnessed someone walking their dog without immediately retrieving its waste." Bob shifted uncomfortably. "That was me, Karen. I forgot a bag and came back 2 minutes later." 2 minutes too late, Robert. This is how civilization crumbles, 2 minutes at a time." Janet crunched loudly on her pretzels. "So what exactly are you proposing?" Karen advanced to her next slide. Immediate implementation of Code Red protocol. The room fell silent except for Janet's nervous chewing. Code Red gives the HOA president emergency powers to address imminent threats to community standards. It allows for immediate fines, mandatory inspections, and if necessary. Karen paused for effect, forced compliance measures. Margaret's voice barely whispered, "What does that mean?" "It means if the Hendersons refuse to remove their inflatable menace, we have the authority to remove it ourselves. Professional pool maintenance companies are standing by." The board exchanged glances that ranged from horrified to fascinated. Bob cleared his throat. "Karen, that sounds like trespassing. It's property management. We have legal precedent, the Martinez fence incident of 2019. "Hey," Bob protested, "that fence was 6 inches over the property line. And we handled it swiftly and decisively." Karen snapped. "Just like we'll handle this." Janet raised her hand. "Can we just talk to them again? Maybe compromise. Pool float hours?" Karen's laugh was sharp and bitter. "You don't negotiate with chaos, Janet. You eliminate it." The vote was closer than Karen expected. 3 in favor, 1 abstention, and 1 passionate dissent from Margaret, who stormed out muttering about power trips and community theater. By Friday morning, Karen had implemented Code Red with military precision. She'd established a surveillance schedule, created violation logs, and even purchased a professional camera with a telephoto lens. Her dining room had been converted into a command center, complete with a map of the neighborhood marked with colored pins representing different threat levels. The Hendersons' house was marked with a red pin. At precisely noon, Karen positioned herself at her kitchen window with a cup of coffee and her new camera. The flamingo floated serenely in the afternoon sun, occasionally spinning in the pool's gentle current, seemingly unaware that it had become the most photographed piece of plastic in suburban history. Her phone rang. The caller ID showed Mike Henderson. "Karen, this has gone far enough." His voice was tight with controlled anger. "My kids are afraid to play in their own backyard because you've been taking pictures of our house like some kind of stalker. Documenting violations isn't stalking, Michael. It's responsible community leadership. It's harassment. And if you don't stop, I'm calling the police." Karen felt something cold and sharp settle in her chest, Are you threatening me? Karen's world began unraveling at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday when she discovered the flamingo had multiplied overnight. Where once there had been one defiant pink bird, now an entire flock bobbed in the Henderson's pool. Flamingos of every size, color, and design, creating a carnival of rubber rebellion that made her morning coffee taste like defeat. Her phone exploded with notifications from neighbors posting photos with captions like "Flamingo Solidarity" and "Honk if you love pool birds." Someone had even created a hashtag Flamingo Assistance. "This is war," Karen whispered to her reflection in the coffee pot, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. Dark circles under her eyes betrayed 3 weeks of obsessive surveillance, and her usually immaculate appearance showed signs of strain. Mismatched earrings, a small stain on her blazer from yesterday's stress-eating incident. By the time she reached her command center, Karen discovered the situation had deteriorated beyond her worst nightmares. The neighborhood app showed photos from at least 12 houses, pool noodles arranged in rainbow patterns, garden gnomes wearing tiny sunglasses, and a particularly offensive rubber duck wearing what appeared to be a miniature HOA president badge with a red line through it. Her doorbell rang. Through the peephole, she saw Margaret Chen flanked by 6 other board members and neighbors, all wearing grim expressions and carrying manila folders. "Karen, we need to talk," Margaret said when she opened the door. They filed into her living room, a space that had once hosted pleasant committee meetings, but now felt like a tribunal. Karen clutched her clipboard like a shield as Margaret opened her folder. "We've received 47 complaints about your conduct as HOA president," Margaret began, her voice surprisingly steady. "Harassment, illegal surveillance, abuse of emergency powers, and misuse of community funds to hire private investigators." "Private? What?" Karen's clipboard trembled. "I hired a documentation specialist. You hired a man to sit in a van outside the Hendersons' house for 8 hours a day." Bob Martinez interjected. "Their children are having nightmares about the scary picture man." Janet Kim leaned forward, her usual nervous energy replaced by something harder. "Karen, you spent the community's emergency fund on a legal battle over a pool float. We're broke." The words hit Karen like cold water. She looked around the room at faces that had once respected her leadership, now showing mixtures of disappointment, anger, and something worse, pity. "I was protecting our property values," she said weakly. "Our property values have dropped 12% in the past month," Margaret replied, consulting her notes. "Potential buyers are calling the neighborhood militant and unwelcoming. 3 families have already moved out rather than deal with the constant conflicts." Karen felt the walls of her perfectly ordered world crumbling. But the covenants, the standards. Karen Whitfield nearly choked on her morning espresso when she spotted it through her kitchen window. A 6-foot inflatable flamingo bobbing defiantly in the Hendersons' backyard pool. Hot coffee splashed across her pristine granite countertop as she lunged for her binoculars, the same military-grade pair she used to document 17 separate covenant violations in the past month. "Are you kidding me right now?" she muttered, adjusting the focus. The pink monstrosity wasn't just any pool float. It was wearing a tiny sun hat and sunglasses, mocking everything she stood for as Homeowners Association president. Her phone buzzed with notifications from the neighborhood app she'd created, Oakwood Estates Watch. 3 residents had already posted photos of the offensive inflatable, using crying laughing emojis that made Karen's left eye twitch. "Unacceptable," she declared to her reflection in the black coffee. "Absolutely unacceptable." 20 minutes later, Karen stood on the Hendersons' doorstep in her navy blazer and clipboard armor, having power-warped the 3 blocks in record time. Her sensible flats clicked against the brick as she rehearsed her opening statement. Mike Henderson answered the door in swim shorts and a World's Okayest Dad shirt, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Behind him, Karen could hear children's laughter echoing from the backyard. "Good morning, Michael," Karen began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd memorized every subsection of their community covenant. "I'm here regarding your flagrant violation of Section 4.2b, decorative pool accessories." Mike's shoulders sagged. "Karen, It's just a pool float. The kids love it. It's not just anything. It's a gateway violation. Karen flipped through her clipboard with practiced efficiency. First it's oversized inflatables, then it's yard ornaments, then suddenly our property values are plummeting because everyone thinks they can turn their backyards into carnival sideshows. It's a flamingo, not a Ferris wheel. Today it's a flamingo. Tomorrow it could be a unicorn with LED lights and a sound system. Karen's voice rose with each word. Where does it end, Michael? Where does it end? From the backyard came the sound of a splash, followed by a child's delighted shriek. Mike glanced over his shoulder, then back at Karen with something that looked dangerously close to defiance. You know what? It ends here, he said quietly. My kids have been inside playing video games all summer because their friends moved away when their parents got tired of your constant harassment. That flamingo is staying. Karen felt heat creep up her neck. In 3 years as HOA president, no one had ever directly challenged her authority. The carefully constructed order of Oakwood Estates was crumbling before her eyes, and it started with one ridiculous pink bird. Michael, I'm trying to help you avoid a formal citation. The fine structure begins at $50 and escalates from there. Send me the bill. Mike started closing the door, then paused. Oh, and Karen, we're having a pool party this weekend. Feel free to file a complaint about that too. The door clicked shut, leaving Karen alone on the porch with her clipboard and a growing sense that something fundamental had shifted in her perfectly ordered world. She walked back to her house in silence, her mind racing through the HOA bylaws, searching for the nuclear option she knew existed somewhere in the fine print. By the time she reached her front door, she'd found it. Emergency Community Standards Review. One phone call later, she'd scheduled an emergency board meeting for Thursday evening. If Mike Henderson wanted to declare war over a pool float, she'd give him a war. But as she hung up the phone, she caught her reflection in the hallway mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back, jaw clenched, eyes blazing with a fury that seemed disproportionate to the crime. Something about the flamingo had awakened something dangerous in Karen Whitfield, and she wasn't entirely sure she could control it.